The Arab American Culture Reading for American Diversity. Arab Americans are Americans who have roots in the Arab world, that is, the areas where people speak the Arabic language and other cultural traditions. The Arab world includes much of the Middle East, the region that spreads across southwestern Asia and northern Africa. Countries of the world include Algeria, Bahrain, Egypt, Iraq, Jordan, Kuwait, Lebanon, Libya, Mauritania, Morocco, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Sudan, Syria, Tunisia, the United Arab Emirates, and Yemen. The Arab world also includes the historic region of Palestine. Palestine today consists of the State of Israel and two Palestinian territories, the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. About 3.5 million Arab Americans live in the United States, roughly 1% of the population. Nearly half of them have roots in either Lebanon or Syria. Large numbers also come from Egypt, Iraq, Jordan, and Palestine. 95% of all Arab Americans live in the metropolitan areas. They live in all 50 states, but the largest populations are California, Michigan, and New York. In the Middle East, more than 95% of Arabs are Muslim, that is, followers of the religion of Islam. However, less than half of all Arab Americans practice Islam. Many Arab Americans belong to Christian religious groups. Many Arab Americans speak the Arabic language and emphasize the teaching of Arabic to their children. Muslim Arab Americans especially stress the importance of Arabic, since it is the language of the Quran, the sacred book of Islam. Some new immigrants keep certain customs, habits, and traditions from their homelands. For example, an Arab American Muslim girl might cover her hair with a headscarf and still wear jeans and sneakers like other American girls. Aspects of Arab culture have become part of the daily life of many Americans. For instance, pita bread and chickpea dishes, such as hummus, are familiar foods for many Americans in the United States. In addition, some people use couscous, a steamed cracked wheat, in many dishes. Couscous originated in northern Africa. Henna, a reddish dye, is a common cosmetic product that has roots in the Arab world. Belly dancing is a Middle Eastern dance style that many people in the United States use as a form of exercise or entertainment. Ray music originated in Algeria and combines Arabic love poetry and Bedouin folk music. Modern Ray is also influenced rock, flamenco, soul, and reggae. Arab immigrants began settling in the United States in the 1880s. The first wave of immigrants was mainly Christian Arabs from the lands that are now Lebanon and Syria, then part of the Ottoman Empire. They came to the United States in search of economic opportunity, freedom from famine, and other harsh conditions, and freedom to practice Christianity. Most Arab immigrants settled in commercial and industrial areas. By 1925, an estimated 200,000 Arabs were living in the United States. During the late 1800s and early 1900s, many Arab immigrants faced challenges to their eligibility for U.S. citizenship. Many of these challenges involved special restrictions the United States government had placed on immigration for Israel. Some judges denied Arab immigrants, most of whom came from southwestern Asia, whereas white immigrants were given citizenship. Arab immigrants faced additional obstacles in the early 1900s when quotas or limits were placed on immigration from countries outside of Northern Europe. Under the National Origins Act of 1924, the United States admitted only a few hundred immigrants annually. During the mid 1900s, cultural transformations took place among many Arab Americans. They continued to organize around their Arab heritage, such as establishing cultural organizations, charity groups, mosques, and church. In the years surrounding World War II, Arab Americans were strongly patriotic, served in the military, and were proud of their U.S. citizenship. Most Arab American families focus heavily on the education and economic advancement. A new wave of Arab immigrants came to the United States after the government lifted nationality based immigration quotas in the 1960s. Many immigrants came to avoid instability and violence associated with conflicts in newly independent Arab states. The Arab Israeli War of 1948 and 1967, for instance, displaced hundreds of thousands of Palestinians. The second wave of immigrants came primarily from Egypt, Iraq, Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, and Palestine, which included large numbers of Muslims. Many of these Muslims faced unique challenges in balancing their religious life with American culture. Many Americans knew little about and were often hostile to Muslim beliefs and traditions. The second wave of immigrants placed a heavy emphasis on ethnic identity and on the continuation of Arab traditions. Since the 1960s, numerous Arab American organizations have sought to assist Arab immigrants, foster ties with their ancestral world, and promote the use of the Arabic language. By the 1990s, more than 10,000 immigrants arrived in the United States each year. In the late 1990s, the early 2000s, however, changes in immigration law made it more difficult for them to come to the United States. The Arab American community has been directly affected by political instability in the Middle East, the terrorist attacks of September 11th, 2001, and hostilities between the United States and parts of the Arab world. Terrorists responsible for the September 11th attacks were Arab Muslims. Some Americans began to treat Arab Americans with suspicion and hostility. Many innocent Arab Americans faced discrimination, harassment, threats, and violence in the months and years following the attacks. Many people argued that certain government actions unfairly targeted Arabs and Muslims in the United States. The Iraq War, which began in 2003, caused further difficulties for Arab Americans, especially those of Iraqi descent. The U.S. government and numerous Arab American organizations have worked to address these concerns and to eliminate discrimination.